going to start off then with the video. So I'm going to start off with the video right off the bat. So.
I think I met Rodney in 2018. It was at the FSR training. I got there a little early and he was already there, and he just welcomed me with open arms, and we began to talk. We had a long conversation. We talked about life, family, and of course sarcoidosis. And I just kept on teasing him because he has such a swag to him, and I kept on letting him know. I was like, you have such a swag to you. And he would just laugh, and I was like, yeah, you remind me of one of my family members. And what really touched me was that he put his arms around me and gave me a hug, and he was like, you are my family. And that really meant a lot to me. He is truly going to be missed. He's going to be missed by the sarcoidosis community. He made such a big impact. I always would call him OG, because he just reminded me, he was an OG. And so, I used to call him that, and he would just laugh and put his arms around me and was like, are you good? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And, he always made sure that I was good. And that really meant a lot to me. I'm going to miss that about him. He was just a good person. He is truly, truly going to be missed. And I know he's going to be missed by the sarcoidosis community greatly. Rodney, may you always be in our hearts, and rest in peace.
Rodney Reese was the first person to welcome me at the 4-H Center in Washington, D.C. in 2018. For the flight home, Rodney and I usually got stuck at the airport because our flights left later in the day. We had a couple drinks and shared our contentions that more than autoimmune, that contaminated air contributed to our sarcoidosis. We were both convinced of this before the plight of the 9/11 firefighters brought it to national attention. My co-ambassador, Paul Parody, and his wife, Betsy, from Bangor, Maine, flew to Louisiana for Rodney's last 5K. I just bought the t-shirt and was a virtual contestant. Rodney was a professional firefighter, and I was a volunteer in rural Maine. I always appreciated that he never called me a seller saver. I miss you, Guy.
It seems like so many people have been talking about how Rodney was the first person to welcome them, the first person to give them a hug, the first person to really make them feel part of a family here. And, so I keep kind of replaying in my head every year, hearing his voice as my husband and I arrived at training, after, a long car ride. We were exhausted and achy, but, we started to open the door and we'd hear, usually Rodney was one of the first voices, and that just immediately rejuvenated us. It made our hearts full. And, once we got through the door and into the lobby, there were hugs and, we were refreshed, and that just, it just affirmed that we were there with family now. And I just, I've been trying to think about like what I would say here, what memory do I have to share? And, the thing is, so much of my memory of Rodney, it's not even the details of a specific moment. Like I couldn't tell you what he said on that first day or that third day or when we were here or when we were there. I could just tell you about the feeling. And, when we saw him at the FSR walk in New Orleans in 2019, he was so vibrant and so spirited and so alive, and he was dancing and he was laughing and he was just so Rodney. And I'm so glad that we got to see him that last time. But overall, there's always that feeling of love, of warmth, of joy, of care, of love. Did I say love? Because that really, that's who and what Rodney was, for me, for so many of us. And we'll always keep that love with us. He's always going to be here.
Hello. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me first of all. Well, welcome to the celebration. I know this is a new platform, so we may have some problems, and I'm sorry if we do. But I did want to welcome you to the celebration of the life of Rodney Reese. I wrote a little something for now, and then I actually am going to uh, hand this off to Mindy Buchanan from FSR as well. Okay, but I wanted to welcome you all. I did want to say a little bit. Today not going to be and hasn't been an easy day, and the event may not be easy as well. Just yesterday was Rodney's birthday, which in itself was tough for many people, especially his family. Yes, we are celebrating the life of Rodney Reese, but we are also missing Rodney, the advocate, but more importantly, the amazing person that he was, and he always will be. He may not be here in person, but he will always be here in spirit and in our hearts. Be patient with the speakers, please. This isn't easy for any of us at this point. Okay. I am a sarcoidosis advocate, just like Rodney. But Rodney was so much more than just an advocate. Tonight, you will hear people speak about Rodney, the great advocate, the great sarcoidosis community man. You will also hear how great of a sarcoidosis family man he was as well. He brought so many that knew him together. All you need to see and hear Rodney, all you needed to see and hear Rodney as he put his arm around you was that you are now part of a family. Not just any family, but his family. I do want to say a very special thank you to Rodney's wife, Harriet, his children, and of course his grandchildren. Anybody that knew him or talked to him knew how much he loved them all. I just want you, the family, to know that you gained a new family, a family that are sarcoidosis warriors. This sarcoidosis community that ranges in the thousands loved Rodney, and I feel I can speak for many of those and to say that we love you as well. Before we start with the speakers, we chose these speakers, which in itself was tough because we knew how many people Rodney did touch and how much he meant to these people. But so don't be upset that we didn't ask you. If we asked everyone, we'd be here for days. On one last note, everyone that is watching from whatever site you are at or will be able to see your, we will be able to see your chats. Like I said, this is going to be tough for me. So if you want to say something about Rodney, we encourage you. This event does not have any sponsors because Rodney transcended all organizations. He brought all of us together in life and in his passing. So I'm now going to bring Mindy up. And Mindy,
thank you so much, Frank, and thank you to Frank and Stronger Than Sarcoidosis for organizing this event to honor Rodney. As Frank mentioned, my name is Mindy Buchanan, and I am the Director of Patient Programs at the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. And one of the things I think you're going to hear, I'm not going to tell you anything new about Rodney today because I think everyone who ever met Rodney came away with the most amazing feeling of community. And I think that you'll continue to hear that throughout the evening. But it was in my role as the Director of Patient Programs where I first met Rodney. He was one of our organization's first patient ambassadors, one of the originals. And when I met him, he became a total lifeline for me to get to know the many patients in the community. I was new to the space, and his easy and genuine way truly had an effect on everyone he encountered. And he was fierce in his advocacy work. I'm sure you'll hear that throughout the evening. He always had a smile, so don't get me wrong, but he was also a force to be reckoned with. He was a force that got people to move and make things happen. And his list of accomplishments is extremely long. He spoke at an international group of physicians about the barriers of getting African Americans to participate in research. He ran one of the most successful support groups in the country. There were proclamations, 5Ks, fire truck pulls, buildings lit up in purple, and the list could go on and on. Certainly past my 5 minutes that I've been allowed, like everyone else. But what I will remember more than anything is that Rodney was a larger than life friend to everyone in this community, including me. Shoot, it is hard, Frank. Okay. So when the news hit about his passing, you will continue to hear it. I can't count the number of patient advocates who contacted me with their story about how Rodney was the first person they met when they were new and how he had made them feel at ease and welcome to this space. And I can say he did the same for me. Rodney's legacy is both in the advocacy work he threw himself into, but also in the many, many people he brought into the work. So tonight we've come to celebrate Rodney as an agent of change, a family man, and a friend. At FSR, we send our love to all of our advocates who are missing Rodney, and of course to his family and lovely children and his wife, Miss Harriet. Thank you.
So now we're going to pass it over to Leslie. Leslie, you're on mute.
I always say that's just the way my family likes me, on mute.
All right, it's all yours, Leslie.
Oh, thank you. So thank you very much for having me here and to talk about my dear friend, my dear colleague. What a spirit. It's uh, as everyone said, this marvelous human being is going to be deeply missed and widely missed. And my first meeting with Rodney was, I think, back in 2014, when he invited me to speak at the gala that he had every year to raise money for sarcoidosis in Baton Rouge. And it was wonderful and it was extraordinary. And then we became very good friends. And what was so brilliant and unremitting about him was that his circumstances and his stumbling blocks, what he experienced and the difficulties that he experienced, he felt others must be experiencing. And that just fueled him. That's just fueled him to reach out, to protect. We're talking about Rodney Reese, who was a firefighter, and he did the exact same thing in sarcoidosis. Because of his own suffering, he recognized that others must be suffering. And though he was working very hard, very intelligently to address his medical needs, at the same time, he was going to reach out and protect everybody else and help everybody else find their way to get good care. And that was Rodney. He was like this incredible star that was bursting with so much light and energy and so many different rays to uplift, to protect. And he did this as a peer support leader, nationally, internationally, locally. Nobody was too small. Everybody was big for Rodney, because you mattered. Everybody meant something to Rodney, and it was a real heartfelt, serious truth of love. It is what love is, and he was that. His peer support, he was there for patient education nationally, internationally. He supported anybody that was touched by sarcoidosis. That includes patients, that includes their families, and that includes clinicians in his teaching, in his advocacy, and in his research and the involvement that he dedicated to research that would reflect the experiences of sarcoidosis patients and their quality of life and their family's quality of life. And we will miss him so much. I will miss him so much every day, looking for texts from Rodney, expecting some, and but just accepting those text message from another realm, I guess. But his love never stops informing my decisions and my understanding of sarcoidosis, and always will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
Marianne, can you hear us? We can't hear Marianne yet. I'm going to step off and see if I can help her out. Hold on 1 minute. So I want you to add to the stream for a second and just see if I can get her to working. I'm going to try to do it over the phone again because it's not coming out. So you could speak through the phone. Go ahead.
All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marianne Grasser, and I am the Executive Director of the Bernie Mac Foundation. And Rhonda R. McCullough is the President and CEO of the Bernie Mac Foundation. And on this wonderful evening, it is a great honor and an opportunity to be able to talk about my beloved and dear friend, Rodney Reese, on behalf of Rhonda and myself. Rhonda and I first met Rodney probably a little over 10 years ago. He had asked my sister, Rhonda, who is President and CEO of the Bernie Mac Foundation, to help support him in his fight for sarcoidosis and raising awareness. In 2012 or 2013, Rodney had a fundraiser event for his not-for-profit organization, and it was called Stepping Out for Sarcoidosis. And he asked Rhonda to please serve as his keynote speaker. When we arrived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Rodney picked us up from the airport, Rhonda and myself. He picked us up personally. And what a wonderful introduction to such a great man. I can see him vividly in my mind's eye. He was a true gentleman, a scholar, and very southern, if you will. There was a charm about Rodney that was unparalleled to anyone else. He was kind. He was very glad to see us. He welcomed us in what he would call the Louisiana way. And we had a wonderful time. And his event was extremely successful. And I remember seeing the compassion and the passion he had for what I believe was his ministry here on earth. And that was to raise awareness for sarcoidosis and to help all people who were affected by this dreaded disease. Of course, I learned then that Rodney also had sarcoidosis, which made it quite very real for him. And that friendship lasted for over 10 years. Rodney, Rhonda, and I became instant friends over the years. And we invited him to Chicago to fellowship with us. And he also attended Bernie Mac Foundation, Purple Carpet events, and other events that we had. We met his entire family many, many, many times. We fellowshiped with his family, with his wife and his children and his grandchildren. And he was just a kind and very decent man. I'm going to miss him greatly. There's probably not a day that goes by that I don't think about Rodney. On a very personal level, Rodney, and this is kind of what I remember about him touching my life. When I visited him in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and anyone who knows Rodney knows that he was very proud of his state and very proud of his city, very proud of his education background and all of that. And he took Rhonda and I to visit universities and campuses. And I remember distinctly he said to me, he said, Marianne, have you ever seen an oak tree? And I said, no, I haven't. And Rodney was the very first and probably the only person that showed me this magnificent oak tree on the campus of, I believe, Southern University in Baton Rouge. I will miss him dearly. I miss Harriet. We haven't seen Harriet in a couple of years, but our prayers go out to Harriet and his wonderful family, his son and his daughter. Rodney was truly, in every sense of the word, a Sarcoidosis warrior. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. All right, so we are actually, I have something that one of Rodney's, one of the people that Rodney mentored was Sabrina Sonier. She's also from Louisiana, and she wasn't able to be here. She is a nurse, and she is at work. So I am going to read what she asked me to read to you guys. She said, Rodney was my mentor. I met Rodney in 2011. Rodney had a support group in Baton Rouge. After talking to Rodney, I decided to go to one of his meetings and see how it was. Rodney and his wife and others in the meeting accepted me with open arms. At that time, I decided to start my own support group. Rodney has always been there for me. Rodney checked on me not only about SARC, but about to see how I was doing with my support group. Rodney was a very wise, funny man. Many times we talked about boiled crabs and, of course, Crown Royal. Rodney was truly a blessing. And from there, I'm actually going to go to Trina. Trina, I'm going to have you speak next.
Good evening. My deepest condolences to the Reese family and friends. My first encounter with Rodney was at an FSR training in DC. And I can just vividly remember how he just had that swag that Regina talked about. I can just vision him right now sitting in a chair with that arm thrown back. He's laid back in his chair and he's being observant and just listening intently. My encounters with Rodney on different platforms has always been inviting, comforting. He just had this glow about him. One thing I would like to say about Rodney is the word humanitarian. He defines all of that. Rodney, from all of my experiences, has always been welcoming, encouraging, uplifting, and he will be greatly missed. I can remember I had put a post up on Facebook and it read along lines about my condition. And I see him peep in, made a comment. Shortly after, Frank hit me up. He was like, Rodney needs prayer. So not a problem. And just know that this is God's will. And following after that, I received a phone call from one of our sisters. And I was in disbelief. I couldn't have a better friend and a better experience than I had with each encounter with Rodney. He would be greatly missed. Greatly missed. I just want to take a time out for a minute to read Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. I hope you don't mind. To everything there's a season and a time for every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Not saying that we're dancing today, but we are celebrating his life, his legacy. Now that the torch still remains, let us move forward, such as he did. There's a work to be done. Thank you, Rodney, for all the life lessons and all the encounters. You would be greatly missed.
We're both muted. How's that? How's that? We're both muted.
Hi, everybody. So I guess it's my turn now. I think I'm probably the one that is the most emotional throughout this entire lineup. I had the pleasure of being extremely close to not only Rodney, but his wife, Harriet, as well. The last 2 weeks of Rodney's life, I had the privilege of talking to Harriet every day. I've learned some things about Rodney that I never knew. I learned some things about his family. I learned some things about his fight with sarcoidosis, how passionate he was, and everything like that. And I also had the opportunity to talk to him briefly. In every conversation we had was extremely brief because of the overexertion and things like that. And just making sure that he was well. There was never a time that I was in his presence that I didn't feel like he loved me. He was my brother. When I first met him, I wanted to call him Unc. I was like, okay, Unc, you got a little swag with you and everything. And I wanted to be like Uncle Rodney, because everybody's uncle was cool. Everybody's uncle was cool. And so he was like, oh, nah, little sis. He said, you can't call me Unc because I ain't that old. I said, okay. So that's how I became the little sis to big brother Rodney. And it was just always a pleasure. The last couple of days have been rough leading up to this point, knowing that his birthday was just passing and knowing that we were having this platform on tonight. It was rough. I became overly emotional just thinking about what we would do if he was here, what things he would be saying to me right now with some of the things that I have going on in my personal life. And just feeling the love from him and knowing that all the great things that I have going on with me, I'm not getting any text messages. I'm not getting any emails. I'm not getting any messages on Facebook or Instagram saying, hey, little sis, I see you, or anything like that. And it's disheartening. But at the same time, I know he sees everything that I'm doing. He sees everything that I'm doing. He's a part of everything that I'm doing because I have him in my mind when I'm doing it. Rodney was just Rodney. He's somebody that you cannot duplicate. And I don't want anybody to try. To have a soul like his, to have a spirit as sweet as his, it was just amazing to experience. So I'm extremely blessed. I'm lucky to have had him a part of my life physically, and I still have him a part of my life mentally and emotionally and spiritually. I love you, Rodney, and we miss you so much.
Thank you, Chester. I guess it's up to me now. Hi again. I did write things down because I know I was going to get emotional. Chester, I don't know who's going to be more emotional, you or me. But I think I might beat you on this one today because I had a really hard time yesterday and today. Like you said, yesterday was his birthday, and today this is really hard. Well, so I get to be the last lone speaker, but I actually chose this spot. Not because I knew him any better than any of the other speakers, it's because my bond with Rodney was different than most. most people that see me or know me think that I am like a stoic, either very, very happy or a stoic person. Well, this may blow that myth out. You see, we all know Rodney the advocate, and some knew Rodney the person, but I knew him as Rodney, my brother. Not like a blood brother, but as someone who I knew I could count on. And he always knew that he could count on me whenever needed. We had this bond from the very first time we met. I'll talk more about that in the roundtable. The stories are actually becoming legendary and they're growing, but it's funny. But everyone talks about how he just brought you in with his charm and his suave way. But for me, it was different. Don't get me wrong. Yes, he was charming and suave. But we had this crazy bond. He knew when I wasn't feeling well without me even telling him or even putting it on social media. All of a sudden, I would get a phone call. What's going on? And I would be like, what? I didn't say anything. But yeah, so, well, you see, it all started with the three amigos. It was Paul Dickinson, Rodney Reese, and myself. Why we were named that? I guess it was because we were inseparable at the FSR ambassador trainings. We would sit there and talk about our lives, our health, but mostly about nothing. Well, it would be nothing to others, but to us, it was everything. It told each of us who the other was. Those conversations then became phone calls, which became somewhat of a lifeline for me. You see, when we became the three amigos, I was just told I was terminally ill. They never admitted it to me, and I asked them many times, but I believe they were taking turns calling me just to make sure my spirits were up. They wouldn't let me feel sorry for myself at all. Well, 2 years ago, Paul passed away, and that really hit my heart. That hit hard. The first call I got after being told by FSR was Rodney. He, of course, got the call. I can remember reminiscing about Paul, all the good things, of course. Then Rodney said to me, "Don't ever forget this. I love you, brother." You see, Paul, Rodney, and I had this thing, and I said it before. We would never just say goodbye. It was always ended with, "I love you, brother." These past 20 months have been hard on many of us with COVID, especially all of us dealing with sarcoidosis. You see, Rodney always saw opportunities. We already had an online support group in which we were admins on, and he was like, "Let's get people to join us." He goes, "They need to talk." So we started recruiting more and more people. Then it was a call from him. "Hey, brother, I know this amazing doctor, Dr. Sakatu, doing this research. You have to be part of it." We never knew we were going to be part of a medical journal. You see, him and I never cared about being the main person or being a person in the limelight. We cared how it was going to help the patients. He always reminded me that when I second guessed myself. I could tell you guys a million stories, but I'm just going to end it with this part of it. When he was in the hospital with COVID, he ended up in the ICU on full oxygen. He bribed the nurse for a phone call to call me. Now, this phone call wasn't him looking for sympathy at all. This is how it went. "Hey, brother, I caught COVID. This is my second day in ICU, and I had to bribe the nurse to get a phone so I can call you. You know how I am." And then he goes on saying, "I remembered you had a heart procedure. I wanted to see how you were doing." I was like, "How am I doing? Are you kidding me?" He's like, "Yeah, brother, you need to take care of yourself. You have a lot more to do." I asked him, what is going on? And he said, "I'm on 100% oxygen, but I am okay. Don't worry about me. I will be okay. Just remember, I love you, brother." And of course I answered, "I love you, brother." So Rodney, this isn't goodbye. This is I love you, brother. And I always will. So on that note, I'm gonna invite everybody else up so we can actually talk some good things about Rodney and end this on a celebration and not. Let me get everybody up on this. I'm bringing everybody up who's on here, so whether you like it or not. Hi guys. All right, now everybody's on mute except for me. How are we gonna have a roundtable discussion if everybody's on mute?
So you want us to come off mute?
Yes, please. I don't want to be the only one speaking. I actually gonna really quickly. I'm gonna mute everybody. I mean, everybody else can. I'm just gonna have Marianne just wanted to say something really quick. So if I can get her back on here and have her speak really quickly.
That's a good point. Before you reach out, chat, you might want to chat with DeQuincy to see. Maybe she's already.
All right, so Marianne just wanted to say a couple of things really quickly before we got started. This way we didn't have the echo. Go ahead, Marianne.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being patient with me in the technical difficulties. When I was talking about Rodney, I forgot one of the most important parts of knowing Rodney. Rodney was the person that connected Rhonda and I to Frank, and what a blessing Frank has been. And I believe in my whole heart and in my spirit that there was something very methodical that Rodney did, because he and Frank, Rodney and Frank were dear, dear, dear friends. And I believe that Rodney, in his own way, passed the torch to Frank to be the connective dot, if you will, for all of us. So I'm honored to meet some of you I've never met, but mostly all of you. I know you through Frank. And so I just wanted to say that I am very grateful and thankful that Rodney, amidst everything that he was a connector and knew how to bring people together. And I thank you for Rodney introducing Rhonda and I to Frank.
And I want to thank you. I do want to thank you as well. You know, we've done some many things lately, and like you said, it was thanks to Rodney to bring us together, and I'm so happy that we have.
The best you can.
Yes.
For this day.
Am I going to come up with? Do you have any reverb? All right. I hear somebody in the background here. All right. So let's start it off with Chester. I'm going to ask you, like, what do you feel really, brings out what Rodney was about?
It won't.
Chester, you going in and out.
There we go. Finally. So what was Rodney all about? New Orleans, Baton Rouge. It was never a time that we were not together because I'm a Carolina Panthers fan and he's a New Orleans Saints fan. We're in the same division together, and we always did this during football season. So if you knew anything about Rodney, you knew that he had sarcoidosis and you knew he loved his New Orleans Saints. That's exactly what Rodney was all about. And he used to get mad at FSR because they would always schedule training around Mardi Gras time and stuff. So yeah, he was all about Louisiana. Everything about Louisiana, the crawfish, the crab legs, the shrimp, all of that good stuff. That is who Rodney was. And it was so amazing to hear him talk about the place that he loved so much. And it was refreshing. And it made me get on my P's and Q's. Let me talk about my city as much as I love it. You know, let me talk about it so people can feel at home when they talk to me about where I'm from. So, and I felt like I was at home when he talked about New Orleans or when he talked about Baton Rouge. So that's, to me, that's what Rodney was all about.
Okay. And Trina, I know that you've had many fun times with him. So tell us, give us a good story over here about Rodney.
By me doing that, I'm telling on myself, so don't judge me. I remember the first time when we participated in the FSR training, and we went out. I think it was like a social night out, and we were upstairs at some place in Maryland, and I stepped out to have a little smoke break. And I caught myself going around the corner. Yes, like I said, Mindy, I'm telling on myself. So I went around the corner discreetly, you know, thinking I'm not going to get busted. You know, this is my downtime. This is me. And woe and behold, I turned around and I seen a small image coming around the corner. And I had the look of fear. Busted. And he just looked at me and he nodded his head and continued on and never judged me. But he did talk to me. And he told me, he said, Trina, you know better to. All right, Rodney, you got it. You got it. You got it. I'm going home. Thanks for correcting me. Don't judge me. And he never did.
Always Rodney. Leslie, I know that you've known him for a while, and I know I've heard some stories, but how about some stories that you would be able to let everybody else know about Rodney?
Well, gosh, I think that was one thing about him. Was that his kindness, and that's been repeated here, his compassion, and he was not judgmental. He was, but at the same time, he was intolerant of disrespect and lack of effort and gosh, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if I can tell this story. Oh gosh, I can't tell this story. I don't think well, I will tell this story. I will tell this story. Okay, he would often share with me his past encounters of his experiences in healthcare. And his experiences not just as a sarcoidosis patient, but as a man who is Black. And he would, you know, he would recount specific frustrations. And I remember one time after he had his diagnosis of sarcoidosis, and you know, he was seeking care. He was in a doctor's office, somewhat well known. He was getting pushback when he was trying to talk about certain issues, which related to pain, but he wasn't asking for pain medicine. He was asking for help in a way forward. And so he basically stood up and he said, listen, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to take my little black bottom, and he said in a different word, and I'm going to turn around and walk right out of here, and you're going to watch it walk away. And I just thought that was, I mean, he was so cute in a moment of frustration, you know, talking about this terrible moment of frustration. And I kind of felt that's a gift, you know, that's something. And you know, but I think that his allegiance to humanity and to not let things go and that's so important. And his efforts, he's part of those large efforts to repair this disparity that we see in healthcare and disparity that we see in communication. And I'm really proud that we were able to write that publication together, which did include a section on disparity and who are the people that end up getting left on prednisone for years and years and years without a thought, you know, or waiting to get next step care or get their calls returned or delayed diagnoses, and who suffer a larger proportion of disability, either because of being left on prednisone forever or complications that are missed because, you know, the resources are just not shared fairly. And this was close to his heart and close to something we shared. And I just thought we'd have many, many more conversations like that.
Yeah, I remember our conversation. I'm getting a feedback here, I guess. I do remember conversations during our meetings about, you know, we were supposed to go out drinking, and Rodney kept on saying how we were going to go out and meet somewhere and go out drinking, and we were all worried about our livers when it came to.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and part of that was that we were an international group participating in this research, and some of those folks were in Scotland, and there were I think you and Rodney and Mike Howie especially were going to go off and have a scotch somewhere, and you were just musing about the time of. We really felt like it's, you know, we survived COVID, that we were all going to meet together, and then the vaccine came around and we were all feeling safe, you know, and that this was going to happen, that we would all meet in person. Frank and I, we've never met in person. We've only have a deep relationship through hours and hours of virtual work together. And I, yeah.
Yeah. So, Mindy, I know you've had your talk with many times. Just can you give us one, a moment in time of what that would really describe what Rodney was about?
You're asking me. I did hear me. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So interestingly, I started at FSR in 2019, and I only met a handful of people in person because my first training with everybody, we only took patient navigators and a couple of the peer mentors to training that year, and then COVID hit. And so interestingly, Rodney was one of the very few patient advocates I got to meet in person. And he had come down from Baton Rouge to be at our booth for the Black Nurses Association, or the National Black Nurses Association. And his son came too. Christopher came out the next day because I had to pop over to Denver for the next conference. And so I was there with Rodney for 2 days at the booth. And, you know, I'm an introvert. And so it was like I was like, I'm going to go to the booth, I'm going to do the booth thing. And then I'm going to go back to my Airbnb and I'm going to read. And I'm probably going to walk around the city, but I'm going to have some earphones in and no one's going to talk to me. And Rodney was just like not having it. He was not going to have me being out there alone and not experiencing New Orleans. And even then, like it was still like pulling teeth to get me to get to go out, because there's just I just want to be in my pajamas with a book. I don't you guys know, so many of you know me, and that's like not like, yeah. So, but Rodney wasn't having it, and he got me to go and see some stuff in New Orleans, and he got me to go and eat beignets, which I don't like fried food, but he was like, no, he's like, Mindy. Every time he would say my name, I can hear it. I can still hear it. It's the way he would say it. Now, Mindy. Like, it was the best. I loved hearing Rodney say my name, because I always knew whatever was going to come after it was like some quip of genius after that. Right? Like, he was going to lay down some amazing information on me after he said my name every time. And so he says, you can't be here, and it's no big deal. It's not like the fried. It's not like the fried. You need to try it. And we went to Cafe Du Monde, and we had beignets and the chicory coffee, and like the door to the outside where there's water was like constantly opening and closing. And every time it opened, powdered sugar just flew. We were both covered in powdered sugar, showing up to the booth at FSR looking like we had just spent a night at the Roxbury or somewhere else, like having a good time. And anyway, yeah. So one of my most treasured moments of ever doing anything with FSR was going to that conference and having Rodney drag me out of my introverted shell. And it was worth it. I wouldn't give it up for the world.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like it, Rodney. So Kathleen, you don't think I was gonna just let you go. So Kathleen, tell us, I know you have some stories with Rodney between being being on the support group together, or even, being at FSR ambassador training. Go ahead, give us some.
Yes. I remember, well, as you saw at the beginning, the first training that I ever went to, if you remember correctly, Frank, we actually flew. And we were alone. We weren't with our spouses. So we get to DC, and actually when we walked into training, the first thing that happened was Rodney was introduced to me by Frank. And he just looked at me. I felt like a fish out of water. I'm not as introverted as Mindy is, but this was just not my scene. I had just gotten the diagnosis of sarcoidosis. I hadn't even wrapped my head around it. And here I was with a whole bunch of people with purple. And I'm like, what is going on here? But Rodney was introduced to me, and he's like, so what's your story? So I gave him a little bit of it, that it came from my skin first, the dermatological, and now it was in my lungs, and at the time it wasn't anywhere else. And he just puts his arm around me. He pulls me close. I could smell his aftershave. I still can smell that. And he says, baby girl, you're okay. You're with family now. And that's truly what I feel about everybody that I come in contact with. I have just formed a new family. And he is so right. Family is everything. And my sarcoidosis family, if I didn't have you, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be somewhat sane. And that's a lot to do with him. We used to speak after some of the support groups because there were some challenges. And we would get on the phone, and then he'd be like, okay, I need to call little sis. I said, well, don't call little sis until I'm done with little sis. Little sis was always Chasta. So, and then he would always ask about Frank, why Frank wasn't in with the training of the support group. And I'm like, he's busy. It's okay. He's fine. So he's a fantastic man. He touched my heart, and he'll always be there.
I think one of the things is that he just didn't want people to feel isolated, to feel alone, and that building this community was very important. I think it hurt him to think that somebody could be alone or not speaking up or in pain or living alone with anxiety or very down feelings. And he was like this blanket of warmth that he would just cast over everyone. And again, I just feel like he was just this huge protector in so many ways. Yeah.
That he definitely.
He will protect us now forever.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have two quick story. Well, one very quick story, but the other one I'm going to talk a little bit about. The first quick story I have with him was when we were all in COVID and stuff was going on with George Floyd, and it really brought the numbers down in our support group. Really brought it down. And I remember talking to Kathleen, and it's like we were like two of the maybe three other people there. And we're like, what is going on? And I remember calling Chasta and calling Trina and calling everybody else up. What's going on? Why aren't they going? And everybody was afraid to go after a while because they were afraid to say something. So I call up Rodney and I'm like, Rodney, when have you ever been afraid to say something? He's like, it's not that I'm afraid to say something, I'm afraid to hurt somebody's feelings. And I understood that. But then right there at that moment, I decided, I'm like, you know what we need to do? He's like, what? He goes, no, he said, what? He goes, your mind's going again. I'm like, we need to have a social justice forum. And he's like, what? He's like, I'm like, and I started talking to him about it, telling him that, you know what? And we talking about, how sarcoidosis women, African American women, are the highest that get it, but yet we're not doing anything for the patients when it came to this. This is stress. This is a major cause of stress for not just African Americans, but also for Caucasians, for everybody. And my idea of the social justice, and the reason why I call actually Rodney, at first I was going to say social injustice, but Rodney's like, why don't we call it social justice? And we bring everybody in and let everybody hear everybody. He goes, instead of it just being, all African Americans coming to the forum, why don't we bring everybody in so everybody actually can hear everybody? It doesn't have to be, and it wasn't a negative thing at all. Anybody that went to that forum and was part of that forum will know it was not negative. It was more of we need answers and trying to get answers. But the one thing about that story was that he told me he was in tears when everything happened with George Floyd, and you don't hear that from him. He was not a very emotional man. He was a pretty stoic, and he even said he was, he did that on purpose. But he said he was in tears. He couldn't. One of the main reasons he was in tears is that he couldn't be there to protest. He's been through protests before that with Southern University, and he said, I should be out there. I should be out there protesting. And he's like, it's taking everything for me not to do it. But when I came up with the idea, all of a sudden, I mean, talking about somebody who was so depressed to being like, I mean, he was talking a mile a minute. All right, this is what we need to do, and and I'll call this person, and and that's when I met Bernie Mac's foundation. Is the next day he had a three-way call with Bernie Mac Foundation and with me and Bernie Mac Foundation. Then he had one of his senators there. He had his pastor was there. I mean, he was just, it was like it just opened up a whole new world for him. And then after maybe probably about a couple of weeks later, he calls me up and he thanked me. He just wanted, he's like, he says, you know, as many times as he goes, as many times as you say I help you, he goes, you don't realize how much you know, it goes both ways. He goes, otherwise I wouldn't be in this conversation. If it was only me helping you, he goes, I wouldn't be here. And he goes, you help me just as much. And so, I mean, that alone was like, hearing that from my brother, you know, from an idol. I really consider him my idol when it came to sarcoidosis. Now, the second story is this legendary story that we always talk about. The very first time we had an FSR training, we were in Chicago. And Chester and Trina know about being in Chicago for this one. We were at a hotel, and on the top of the hotel was a bar. And a couple of us went up there, and you know, slowly but surely people were leaving, and it was going and going, and all of a sudden we didn't realize people even left, Rodney and I, because we were just talking and talking, and it wasn't about sarcoidosis. It was literally about life, about where we lived, you know, what we did and all this. All of a sudden, both of us at the same exact time get a phone call. And it's because Diana was there and Harriet was both there, but they went into the room, and we get a phone call it's like I don't know who they planned this or something, but we get a phone call, and we're like, what's the matter? They're like, do you realize it's 4:30 in the morning? And we were like, what? We closed the bar up. The guy actually kept the bar open because of us, because we were there. He wasn't going to close it up until we left. He even said that. He goes, you guys just seemed like you were having so much fun. And then the fun part about it is that we had to be at FSR training the next that morning at 7:30. I think we got woke up to go over there. Oh boy, that was fun.
Y'all should have seen him trying to stay awake. It was hilarious.
But you know, I'll never. I mean, that day was one of the best days of my life because we talked about, like, the same thing I said earlier. We talked about nothing, but it didn't matter. It was, to us, it was everything. And every time we talked, it was always about it. Every little thing that he asked or he told you meant something. And you didn't realize it meant something until later on, a lot of times. But that's just the way Rodney was. And I mean, it was amazing. That was the very first time I met him physically. It was, Facebook, we met, you know, we were talking and stuff like that. But that was the very first time we met, you know, physically. And it was classic. It definitely was classic. But, you know, I don't know if anybody else has any other kind of stories that they wanted to tell. If not, Shasta, I was going to let you kind of be the last person to speak tonight.
Okay, yeah, we were at the Lincoln Hotel for the very first training that we had, and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. We had the scenery with a river across the street. I can't remember what river that was across the street, but it was gorgeous. So
Chicago River.
Yeah, Chicago River. When Frank tasked me with the final thought for Rodney's celebration, it never came to me until maybe just a few minutes ago. One of the things that's synonymous about Rodney is love. Rodney did things with a purpose. He had intent behind everything that he did, and everything he did had purpose behind it. I struggled with his passing, and y'all, I don't think I slept for a whole entire week. I struggled hard. And one of the things that I'm very, very strong in, I'm strong in my faith. And I honestly believe that everybody's here for a purpose. But the other thing aside from that I believe is that we're not going to leave this earth until our purpose is fulfilled. I shared this with Frank and I said, the good thing that I can take away from Rodney's passing is the fact that everything that he did, he was intentional. Everything that he did had purpose. We have all these memories of him. We have all these takeaways from him. We're sad because he's physically not here, but we have so much that we can hold in that he shared with us, that he said to us, that he gave to us. Rodney's purpose was fulfilled. And I honestly believe that he was here for this period of time, and that everything that he did with his intent, with his purpose, God allowed him to leave when his purpose was fulfilled. So that's the takeaway that I got from that. So the thing that I'm going to share with you all to do is that everything that you do, regardless if it's with sarcoidosis, regardless if it's with your job, with your family, with your kids, your grands, do everything with intent, do everything with purpose, because you're not going to leave this world until your purpose is fulfilled.
Yeah, that's the truth. Thank you, Casper. Now, I did ask for all of us to come on mic for 1 second, and there's just one last thing that I really feel we all should say. Okay, you guys ready?
Yep.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
I love you,
Rodney.
Because you know he heard us. You know he
Yeah. He's probably laughing at all of us right now because we did not do that in sync.
All right.
It wasn't our fault. It was the fault of
right.
the internet.
Exactly.
I do want to thank you all for being here. Mindy, thank you for, I know it's super late where you are. What is it, 1 o'clock in the morning now?
Frank? Hi, honey.
Yeah.
Can we mention the education series that's coming up dedicated to Rodney? Well, that we've started.
Yeah, please do.
Maybe Mindy wants to mention it.
Yes, in fact, Dr. Sakaku and Rodney and Frank and several other patient advocates worked on a paper, and that has kind of come out as a 3-part sarcoidosis survival checklist series.
Yeah, it's so awesome to remember. Wow.
And the first one is done about self-advocacy and sarcoidosis. Now I'm forgetting the word. It is 1:30 in the morning here.
Oh my gosh. Where are you?
I'm in Scotland.
Wow.
Sarcoidosis.
I'll spare you. Should I spare you?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry, Mindy. I didn't realize that you were. So, so we organized, because these were things very close to Rodney's heart, a Sarcoidosis Survival Kit, survival checklist. It's a tool. And so it's these are structures and references that people living with sarcoidosis and their families can have close to them to make sure that they know that they're on the right track in the care that they're getting. And so the first one is patterns of disease and disease behavior. And the next one is going to be about the complications of medications and the efficacy of treatment. And then the last one is going to be about self-advocacy and communication. And so these are all by using medical knowledge and understanding these patterns and paradigms of sarcoidosis, that people living with sarcoidosis with this education are better able to advocate for themselves, to know what their rights are, and to know also that you should never feel bad about getting a second opinion, because anybody who's truly a sarcoidosis expert loves to get other people's opinions on cases. Right, Frank?
Okay. You are so true, and I mean, I am so glad that you guys are doing this. I mean, Rodney and I used to talk about it all the time, and this is something that needed to be addressed. And I'm so glad, and thank you, Dr. Sakatu, for addressing it, and FSR as well. I really do appreciate it. And I'm gonna leave us off. I know Chester had a last word, but I do have one last word. Is that I just want to let Rodney's family know that we are there for them. We are all here. We all will be there for her and Harriet and the kids and the grandchildren. Even if you just want to vent, it don't matter. We're here. He's family, and that means you're family. You're stuck with us now. There's nothing you can do about it now. You're stuck with us. But we do love you guys, and I do hope that we brought some good memories for you, for the family. And like I said, once again, we love you and thank you again. And I guess I'm going to end it on that note. All right. Thanks for everybody. I do appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. This was wonderful. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, everyone.